decentralized and centralized space in blockchain. And our guests are Fernando and Dorian. Can you describe a little bit how it's going with your business in regards of all this regulation coming up?
At KuCoin, we have been working on these topics for a very long time. We are one of the largest exchanges worldwide. Like, it's not a new thing for us, what is happening right now in the space. That's why it's actually kind of a two-way relationship. We are speaking with regulators, they are speaking with us. And because of that, sometimes processes seem slow. Now, I have to tell, and to be 100% frank, we don't like to disclose our internal strategies towards regulation in the blue, in the outside, because there is no interest for us to do that. But what I can tell you is that there is definitely a way towards regulation. Now, all the largest actors in the space have a way to reach it. And, let's see how it's going to go this year.
Who will be the last one. So, Fernando, can you describe a little bit CurioInvest and how you are affected by all these things that are happening right now?
CurioInvest was launched basically out of a class at Oxford when they introduced us the regulatory framework. And we went ahead with regulators out of Europe, DACH region. And basically we pitched the idea, what if we can turn a real asset into a token so that we can enable, hundreds, if not thousands of folks to invest on. So that actually meant that from start on, we approached them, we consider terms and conditions, but also a so-called prospectus to reach out across all Europe. And I feel, the rhetoric about that has, matured. It's not really the Wild West, but really, regulatory first, compliance first, hopefully institutional first. And what would you see in the last months with some, big news hitting? It's basically the result of the market going mature very much.
Can you tell us a little bit? So you're mostly focused on B2C segment, or you're working with B2B or big clients? I mean, you have less number of transactions than a centralized exchange.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we put together a marketplace or an ecosystem to bring liquidity to real assets. So the real assets got to come from somewhere. And these are usually family offices or high net worth individuals sitting on thousands, hundreds of millions, fine art, rare cars, watches, maybe music IP, but also other types of assets like commodities and photovoltaic solar coming up next. On the other hand, however, you have basically two customer segments, right? Retail and rather high net worth individuals, professionals. What we're seeing here so far is that, the demand is coming from sophisticated folks who understand the dynamics, who have the technical expertise to basically a KYC, to handle a wallet. And so I feel in the coming years, we will see a growing demand from the public, and hopefully this will improve financial inclusion. Ultimately, it's about all these folks who cannot access these asset classes, who leverage this technology to invest in those assets that, hopefully improve their life standard.
I know that you have implemented KYC a long time ago, just before it becomes mandatory, I think. So can you recall the date? And why was it
actually
decision?
It became mandatory last summer, between July and August. Yeah, I mean, it's part of our measures to take into account the new regulatory framework, the AML, all this we are really stepping into, because that's the way it's going to be right now for at least the foreseeable future. In this way, what we are focusing on is always keeping the security of the assets of our users first and foremost. In all these transitions phases that can happen, that's really what we are trying to do. So there is state-of-the-art security practices that we have internally now. Most of the assets of everyone is in cold wallets. Only living on the hot wallets what is necessary for the exchange to operate on a day-to-day basis.
We highlighted that we're going to talk about decentralized as well. Fernando, can you give us a little bit of explanation? How is it different in terms of KYC and security than you work with decentralized?
I mean, at CurioInvest, we took, an approach to work with regulators and set up the whole infrastructure that essentially turns a real asset into a token. This, of course, requires to comply with all these processes from the scratch. Now, in addition to that, we spin off basically as a centralized ecosystem. These are effectively tools, softwares that anyone can replicate. They are open source, and they basically enhance the user experience of folks who actually purchase these, asset-backed tokens, right? The reality is that decentralization is very challenging to achieve. The tools are there for everyone to replicate, to launch their own so-called front end, But the process from, launching this towards achieving that point, it's not trivial, right? It requires marketing, it requires adoption, it requires really for the team to let go of the decision power and so forth. Now, at Curio, we're very proud to have taken that approach that we, a fair launch, we distribute most of our digital assets and so forth. But the reality is that, it's an ongoing process, right? So we started with the regulated side. We always had that approach to bring the best practices of that world to the, decentralized. Now, the reality is some of these aspects are not trivial. I mean, getting a license for a decentralized protocol is already challenging. We're working with innovative protocols such as Albus in order to improve or wrap up and enable the user to decide, do we want to use this software, open source software, and just replicate it in what it is? Or do we want to use this additional compliance layer that in a way hopefully mitigate future, risk in the future? At the end of the day, you don't want to, swap your assets with someone who has, dirty, wallets, basically.
Or you don't even know who is it, or
right.
But it's very interesting because products like yours, products like ours, it's also a result of the evolutions of the market in these very years, because now there is much more space for more and more hybrid solutions. Like there are more centralized aspects, there are more decentralized aspects. Probably there will still be pure players, pure centralized and pure decentralized. Right. But there is now much more space for hybrid solutions. And let's see where we can integrate, what we can integrate to each service.
I mean, ultimately it's about improving the user experience. So if the end user wants to just replicate and run his own front end, the software is there. It's open source. You can just replicate it with a click. You cannot really stop it. But if he then, as an institutional player might be more concerned about, who he is engaging with and so forth, he might want to have the peace of mind. Well, guess what? There's certainly a solution coming up, and we are pioneering that. We were the first in the world to issue a bond represented as a tokenized units out of DACH region. And now we hopefully, implement this, KYC AML solution for this software, basically.
Yeah, about this implementing. So you were mentioning Albus, you're working with the third-party providers and you work in internal team, or you have another solutions.
The reality is that one cannot just, change the whole ecosystem. It really requires a group of, a consortium to kind of partner up and together build a solution that is resilient, that is secure, and that is compliant. And so we partner out with Albus. We're launching on Neon. Basically, Gpool is also coming out, bringing liquidity. We're very pioneer, very strong on the tech side as well. And so what I feel is that this will provide that first stepping stone towards an ecosystem that's got some liquidity, that's got some exciting, activities. And hopefully that would attract the interest of, various market players, institutional players, and so forth.
As a big retail player, so how have you implemented all these strategies? Have you used third-party providers or external audit, or you have internal audit? So I do believe that talking about the size of your company, your approach is quite different. So can you?
Well, we cannot let ourselves have the user's assets at risk, as I mentioned. That's the reason why we have really state-of-the-art encryption algorithm regarding the protection of the user's wallets and the platform itself. Actually, we have a bounty, $1 million USDT bounty for hackers, so they can always try to come and help us strengthen our own security. And regarding that, actually, we also have a full risk assessment team internally. There is the proof of reserve that we have been providing now for more than a year. You can check every month. We have way much more than what our users have in our own wallets. So that's something that we have been consistent with, and since the very beginning of the Black Swan events of 2023. And regarding this risk assessment team, it's actually much more important than it looks like, because the risks don't always come only from AML. They also come from the type of assets that you accept to list on your platform, right? And the way we have been actually very good at this is having a full dedicated team overseeing the type of assets we are listing, the quality that they have, and also the teams, what they deliver on the long run, not leaving this job unattended and just considering that because we decided to list them at some point, it means that it's going fine, etc. No, we have a real good team at doing that. And that's why we have been one of the largest players that have listed most assets and we have had very, very few bad experiences.
All these things you are done with your local team, you don't hire any outsourced or...
Well, when you look at third parties, we are actually investigating to follow the trend of what is being asked by users. For example, we developed our own Web3 wallet, which we are trying to integrate in ways with the platform to make it even more seamless and very open choice for people who want to keep their assets in a decentralized way as soon as they finish trading on the centralized platform. Same thing with institutional, actually. They want to rely sometimes on third-party custodians. We are exploring this way to try to provide them third-party custodians maybe in 2024 if we manage to integrate it.
All these things you have enumerated, does it have any impact end users? I mean, in terms of the fees or anything? Was it costly solution or?
It's costly solution for us to implement. But in the end, if the end user use these solutions, if we observe that there is a real desire for it, it's our job to service people this way. We are the people's exchange after all.
And what about your company? Was it a burden or was it hard to implement to comply with all these regulations coming?
Bootstrap startups and so forth rely on high quality suppliers. And at the end of the day, there is, an onboarding due diligence process in which you compare the solutions, the prices, and the quality standards. At Curio, we pioneer with, very, savvy experts in the space that understood what we were doing. This nevertheless didn't mean that we are not continuously seeking and improving the current setup. I've always said user first, community first, and the idea of having these, walls and improving the user journey is at the core of the product itself. So we are continuously, challenging it, getting a quality check, and of course updating, calibrating it with the latest regulatory changes. As you know, MiCA is coming up and so forth. So you want to be, at the front of these regulatory changes, and you want to meet them from the start. And this is where, on a quarterly basis, we review where we are, what are the fees, and how we can implement them.
Really one question that we ask every guest coming here. So are you for or against of KYC universal application for everything happening in crypto industry?
The reality is that there's a tremendous amount of unbanked people that simply don't have an ID, that simply cannot access these. And having a decentralized permissionless setup enables these folks to, to include them in this abundance. I am of the opinion that having the KYC is important and relevant in AML, and this already addresses and, hinders lots of bad actors, despite they're actually a minor percentage in total. But there's got to be a smarter way to find those bad actors without having, unnecessary walls, put it this way. DeFi is a sandbox to find precisely that way. It doesn't mean just a reckless access for, free for all, but rather to find a smarter way to identify those trends. And since, blockchain enables unprecedented, traceability, immutability, I feel we are, as an industry, behind something major that would effectively enable these unbanked folks to join this abundance of finance, of services, lending, payments, to not get ripped off by the traditional folks that take, a massive cut to send, your grandma, your mom, some, minor compensation. Come on.
What about the FA?
I would say that KYCing everything is the way the industry works at the moment, especially when you talk about centralized agents. Personally speaking, I think it's very important that people have the choice and that the choice remains, that this decentralized space continues to exist, where it's still possible to do things and, as you said, integrate, have access to certain types of assets, etc., without KYC, just for the sake of privacy rights. And because of that, we could see innovations. I mean, we have zero knowledge proof blockchains now. This was not maybe thought of in advance, and this rise of demand for KYC maybe made it unavoidable and maybe a component of something that will guarantee privacy rights in the future in a compliant way. Once again, it's very modular. I think it depends on your place as an agent in the industry. So for some agents, it's going to be KYC on demand
first
for everyone, KYC first. For others, it's very important as a small retail to always be able to guarantee total privacy on your small assets that you want to keep. And on the long run, probably coexistence between these two spaces and the way they can coexist is going to be one of the largest issues that regulators will have to face in the coming years.
Thank you for answering this open question, and thank you for coming today for Albus Talks. It's over for today. Thank you for watching us on Albus Talks, and see you again next time.